Our opening thought comes from Nelson Mandela in his work, The Long Walk to Freedom. Mandela writes, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave person is not one who does not feel afraid, but one who conquers that fear." Our next reading comes from Mary Oliver, the poem The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations through their melancholy, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Our next reading comes from Maya Angelou, Touched by an Angel. We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high, holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. Love arrives, and in its train comes ecstasies, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Yet if we be bold, love strikes away the chains of fear from our souls. We are weaned from our timidity in the flush of love's light. We dare be brave, and suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. I noticed as I was preparing this week to speak on courage, finding courage in chaos, that I was turning more and more to poetry, as you heard in the readings, than I was to prose or philosophy, as the case is often is the case in the work that I do, because it's in poetry that I think we sometimes hear the calling that we need to, in a creative way that's necessary for us to have the courage to move forward in times like these. So I'm thankful for poets and the prophetic voice that we hear in their words. It is really normal and justified to be scared in times like these. It's normal to be afraid in times like these. Political violence is on the rise. Governmental power is being misused and abused. High-profile critics of our government are being unjustly prosecuted. Academic freedom and freedom of speech and assembly are under extreme threat at our colleges and our universities in both states that we are from in this community. Pristine areas of nature are being plundered for short-term and unsustainable economic gain. Access to affordable health care is under imminent threat. Cities are being occupied by our own military. Immigrants are being disappeared into facilities that are concentration camps, both inside and outside of the United States, and some being disappeared into places that we know not where or what. Our Navy is blatantly flouting international law by carrying out extrajudicial executions of unidentified persons on boats who may or may not be connected to drug cartels. And the most vulnerable among us are experiencing increased attacks simply for being who they are. To make matters worse, the institutions that we may have thought would protect us from autocracy and fascism have proven to be grossly inadequate. And they are more often than not part of the problem rather than part of the solution. I think of the Supreme Court when I think of that, and Congress, and so many other institutions that are failing us. It's difficult to see in all of this a light at the end of the fascist tunnel in which we as a society currently find ourselves. Martin Luther King Jr.'s question that he posed in 1967 that you find at the top of your bulletin today, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? This question seems as relevant now as ever before. Though we long for beloved community, we are experiencing chaos. And now we must ask ourselves, how can we find courage within community in the midst of this chaos? Personally, I found it helpful to learn from the experience of others who have found courage in chaos in their time and in their place. Many of you know I spent a week in South Africa earlier this month. The first time I had an opportunity to visit a country in Africa in my life. And while I was there, it led me to reflect on the courage that so many Black South Africans expressed during their experiences of injustices in apartheid, or apartheid as they pronounce it. Apartheid was a time of extreme racial injustice and economic injustice. And so many Black South Africans had the courage to resist apartheid, even though doing so came with grave risks, both to their freedom and to their very lives. No one from my generation or older will ever forget the 27 years that Nelson Mandela, who was the leader of the anti-apartheid movement, spent in prison in South Africa before finally being released in 1990. I bet everyone here remembers that moment and the joy and triumph of that moment as he was released from prison. And perhaps our memory of the triumph of Mandela's release from prison and his subsequent election to the presidency of South Africa might overshadow the fact that because of the courage of his convictions, he languished in prison for 27 years. In reflecting on his time in prison and the sacrifices he made in his resistance to apartheid, Mandela wrote these words, which I read before. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man, he's speaking of himself more here, the brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. As courageous as Nelson Mandela was, he could not resist apartheid alone. He also needed the support and the courage of his community, a community that included countless unknown persons who kept up the resistance to the injustice even when all seemed lost. Some of those persons are well known to us. Reverend Desmond Tutu, for example, who tirelessly and relentlessly spoke out for justice and encouraged the rest of the world to be in solidarity with Black South Africans and end the evil of apartheid. Desmond Tutu reminded us that we must have the courage to take sides. We must have the courage to take sides in situations of injustice. Neutrality in relation to injustice is not a moral option. Tutu proclaimed, quote, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Neutrality did not bring the evil of apartheid to an end. It took the moral pressure of the international community through economic sanctions and economic boycotts of the apartheid government to finally bring justice to the people of South Africa. Justice requires taking a side. And in our time of injustice and the chaos that's being caused by it, we will also need the support of a community that we can trust in order to cultivate and sustain the courage necessary in times like these to take the side of justice. The pressures to remain silent are ever present. We see them all around us. We see them in the threats and the prosecutions of those that the government disagrees with. We see it in the purging of liberal leftist professors, as we are told, from colleges and universities. We see these pressures around us, and they're always present. And the risk of speaking out are real. But it is important to always remember that there are so many siblings within our community who are extremely vulnerable during this dark time for our country. And being silent is not a moral option. History has shown us the danger of being silent in the face of hate and oppression and threats to human rights, and therefore we cannot be silent. I often think of the baptismal vows of my own faith tradition. Many of you know I'm United Methodist as well as Unitarian Universalist. But in the baptismal vows of my faith tradition, every person is called, quote, to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves, end quote. It is critical that we have courage. It is critical that we find courage in our work to protect the most vulnerable from those who are actively seeking to do them harm. We need to find courage in the chaos for the sake of our transgender siblings, whom the fascists want to erase. We must find courage in the chaos for our immigrant siblings, whom the fascists want to disappear from our communities. We must find courage in the chaos for all of our sisters whom the fascists want to control with the shackles of patriarchy. We must find courage in the chaos for all those around the world whom fascists are threatening with the evil of militarism and violence. We must find courage in the chaos for the millions of persons whom the fascists are sinking deeper and deeper into poverty and economic injustice around the world. And in this chaos, communities like ours hold a deep moral responsibility. It is our moral responsibility to keep the light of freedom, justice, and equity shining in the darkness. It is our moral responsibility not to be silent. It is our moral responsibility to protect the most vulnerable. It is our moral responsibility to this generation and generations of life to come to never give up, because every act of resistance counts in the work for true freedom and justice for all. It is our moral responsibility to find courage in the chaos like so many who have gone before us. May we find this courage. May we find this courage in the chaos. May we find it from one another in our life-giving work together for beloved community. Only then, when we find this courage from each other and this life-giving work, will we have a chance to move from chaos to community. May it be so. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long and we can bend it toward justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. Go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives.